Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? If so, why haven't you started yet? Maybe it's because you're not sure where to start. Well, I've got some good news for you. With the You Can Podcast Now online course, I show you step by step how to begin your podcast and produce new episodes week after week. For some free information, visit youcanpodcastnow.net.
Get ready for your weekly dose of pixie dust with Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePauli, and today on the show, I have Banks from Attractions Magazine joining me. Hello, Banks, and welcome back.
Hey, Jeff, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here because we're talking about something that is near and dear to my heart. It was funny because as I was doing research and getting things in order, I was like moments of super joy and then super sadness just because it's gone. But we're going to be talking about Residential Street, which used to exist at Disney-MGM Studios. And I wanted to have you on for this because you are a former Disney-MGM Studios cast member.
Correct.
Yeah, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your experience there as far as like when you worked there and what attractions you were on?
When I was working there, it was Disney's Hollywood Studios back in 2008 to 2009. I started off there seasonally working at the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie set adventure.
Woohoo!
And after about 6 months of that, I was able to cross-train over to the backlot tour working the water tank. So I got to do the special effects water tank with Michael Bay and all that fun stuff. And it was such a blast. Like, I grew up with MGM being my favorite Walt Disney World theme park. I went 4 times as a kid in the 90s, and that park always had an impact on me. And being able to work there at that backlot tour and at Honey, and seasonally during Christmas, I also worked the Spectacle of Dancing Lights on Streets of America. It was a big full circle moment for me, and I had such a blast during my time there.
That's awesome. And so you said you started in 2008, which is when it became Disney's Hollywood Studios.
Yes.
So you were technically there right at the beginning of Disney's Hollywood Studios.
I really was. I was college. I started off in the college program in 2007 at Custodial at Magic Kingdom, and I remember when the name changed over. It was right before I moved back to Texas, and then came back seasonally in that summer to work at Hollywood Studios. I just remember so many fun memories about working at Honey, and then when I cross-trained over at Backlot Tour, it was during their winter refurbishment. So I was training at the water tank in January of 2009, and this was back when the Imagineers came in to add the automated spiel to the tram. So it was right when they were changing over from the live spieler to the automatic spiel, and I remember getting to ride on test rides on the tram with the Imagineers as they were syncing up the audio. So that was a really fun memory.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Residential Street today. So let's jump into that conversation right now.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
So for folks who do not know what Residential Street is, first of all, let me mention that the angle we're going at here is the first part of this is going to be a bit about the history of Residential Street, followed by what we think Residential Street would look like if it were to be a new thing today in 2019. So let's start with the history just in case folks are unaware of Residential Street, because it's been gone for a long time, sadly. But
yeah.
Residential Street was simply a street of house facades, meaning it was just a shell of a home where there were only a front and side constructed, and this was in order to shoot TV shows, movies, and commercials in the front yard of the homes. And it pretty much looked like a normal residential street that you'd find in a typical suburban neighborhood, other than the fact that oftentimes each house would have a very different style so that they could use it and shoot for different parts of the country. So if you looked at the street as a whole, it might look a little bit strange, but honestly, not too strange to most people, probably if you set dressed it the right way. But primarily, these were used for more close-up shots, so you'd see like one house, maybe a second in the background or something. And it could represent all different areas of the country. And this is, a typical thing on a real studio backlot. And of course, at the time, Disney-MGM Studios was a real studio backlot. So this was pretty cool. But the fun thing is that this street was constructed before the park even opened. So it was ready in 1988. The park, of course, opened on May 1st, 1989. And when it was originally built, there were essentially 7 houses there. And can you name some of the stuff that shot there? I'm sure you can.
Oh man, yeah. So like the iconic ones, of course, they used one of the houses as the establishing shots for the Golden Girls.
Yes, that's probably the most famous one, I would say.
Empty Nest was also shot there. Exteriors,
Which is the spin-off of Golden Girls, yeah.
Ernest Saves Christmas. I do
Yes.
remember Vern's house being on one of the residential street houses.
Yep.
A TV show I grew up watching on Disney Channel was Adventures in Wonderland, and that was Alice's house.
Yes, I remember. It was funny because for a long time I feel like they didn't really mention that. I do remember a little bit later on they'd mention it, but like that's one of the most famous ones in my opinion. I loved Adventures in Wonderland.
Oh yeah. The one that I always think of immediately when I think of Residential Street is always there's this direct to VHS called Mickey's Fun Songs Beach Party at Walt Disney World.
Oh,
and
cool.
if you watch the opening song where all the kids and the characters are singing Celebration is all done on Residential Street. They use like 3 or 4 houses as the kids' houses that Mickey is coming to get them. Come on, hey, we're going to Walt Disney World. And then they film on the streets of America as like they're in the city, and then they get transported to a beach at Walt Disney World.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. The fun thing about this street, specifically Adventures in Wonderland, was, a lot of these homes, like the Golden Girls homes, was built as the Golden Girls home. That was something that was already established. But Adventures in Wonderland, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure amongst these like famous homes, like Empty Nest or Ernest Saves Christmas or Golden Girls, they were kind of just generic homes that could be used for commercials and various things. So I think... I could be wrong, but I think the Adventures in Wonderland house was one of like the generic houses that was just there on the lot. And then they decided once that show went into production that, hey, this is going to be Alice's home. So it was kind of just a standard home that became an iconic home. So that's kind of cool.
That home was used as one of the kids' homes at Beach Party because I remember watching it and we're like, oh, hey, that's Alice's home from the show. So yeah, that was one they used multiple times.
Similarly, MMC, the New Mickey Mouse Club, I remember them shooting a lot of sketches there. Like, they did a lot of fake commercials and stuff like that. And they would shoot a lot there. And then Splash 2, which I gotta be honest, I don't recall at all. I didn't even know that was a thing. But apparently
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, there's a direct-to-video sequel to Splash called Splash 2, T-O-O, and had, like, I think nobody from the original cast, maybe one random person. But it was a terrible flop. Actually, I don't even think they released it on VHS in the United States. I think I was reading about it and it was like in the UK and France or something like that, but it was apparently really, really, really bad.
Would you consider, because every time I was looking at photos and old videos, they had the dog cafe from The Rocketeer. They had that on Residential Street. Would you consider that part of it, Residential Street?
Okay, no. And here's why. So it's actually really funny because that dog cafe from The Rocketeer is it was like at the end of Residential Street, and it was one of those things where I feel like they were like, let's just throw it in there. It'll make sense-ish, but it's certainly not part of a suburban neighborhood, so I don't think it was really part of Residential Street. I was looking at older maps, and from like an aerial bird-eye view, it was definitely like 7 houses that I saw as the original. I do remember in later years that dog cafe was removed. I think it was this area, and they put in like the George of the Jungle house. So,
I don't remember that.
Yeah, this was later years. It was, that Brendan Fraser movie, George of the Jungle, that Disney made. And they stuck that somewhere near Residential Street. So it kind of became this kind of a boneyard for some random homes. So, no, I would not consider that part of it. But interestingly enough, I think it's a replica, but there's somewhere here in North Hollywood, I'm blanking on the name of it, but there's this bar, and the building is in the shape of a giant, like, wine barrel, and you go into the barrel, and in the backyard is, like, that dog cafe house. Yeah, I don't know if that was, like, inspiration for The Rocketeer or what. I've honestly never done the history or the research on it. I'm not a huge Rocketeer fan, but I should sometime because it's literally, like, 10-minute drive from where I live. And
it's kind of a part of MGM history in some way.
So I got to go look into that and do more research. I'll get back to y'all on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there are some pretty cool homes there. Now this was primarily part of the studio tour, which went through like several different name changes. So, but it was part of the studio tour. So primarily this is a street that you rode down. And I will say, as a kid growing up in Massachusetts, obsessed with show business, like, I love backlots. I still do to this day. Like, having lived in Los Angeles as long as I have, there's a lot of stuff that sadly I'm like very jaded to at this point, but walking on a studio backlot, I still love. And I don't know what it is about it, but there's just something really, really magical about it to me. And I can remember riding down this street as a kid in the theme park and like loving it and just like dreaming about walking down it someday, because in general, guests weren't able to do that. In later years, we did get the Osborne family spectacle of dancing lights, which allowed you to walk down this street at night when it was all lit up. I sadly never did that, and I'm so angry because I remember vividly being in the park, taking the tram tour, and seeing like the unlit light strands hanging on the buildings during the day. We just didn't go back at night. I don't know what happened, but I was a kid and I was being dragged along by family. So I regret that tremendously, that I never walked on Residential Street. And I'm curious, as a cast member, oh no, it was gone by the time you were there.
Yeah, so like I think the last year, if I remember correctly, was 2003 was the last year
it was.
Residential Street was there. So I unfortunately didn't come back until 2007. I never got to see it during Christmas. The only time I went to Christmas in the 90s was 93, and that was before the Osborne Lights came. I have very little memories of actually riding the tram as a kid. Mainly the memories I have are seeing it online, but I have so many memories of, Streets of America and Catastrophe Canyon and the costuming departments, everything that was there post Lights, Motors, Action.
So the Osborne family spectacle of dancing lights allowed you to walk down that street. Apparently, also, I was talking with my friend Peter, who was one of the original citizens of Hollywood. He came on the show to do an episode, and he was mentioning, I guess they used to have a lot of special events there that he would work, which I didn't realize. That's kind of a cool area to rent out, and they like have picnics and barbecues there. So I think they did a lot more with this street than I realized, but my memories of it was simply riding down it in a tram. And one of the funny things is, as a kid, I had memories of it being like far away from the theme park, and like this was really the studio backlot where guests didn't walk. And now I look at maps, I'm like, oh, it was like literally right next to, like it was touching the theme park. It was not far away at all. So that's funny. As you mentioned, it was demolished. Sadly, it was just kind of bulldozed in 2003 to make way for Light Motors Action Extreme Stunt Show, which, of course, has now been bulldozed and is part of Galaxy's Edge, or the upcoming Galaxy's Edge. So that means that Residential Street was open to the public from 1989 to 2003, which is a 14-year period. So from 2004 to 2019 today, it's 15 years, which means Residential Street at Disney's Hollywood Studios has not existed for longer than it did.
Oh, wow. Oh, that hit me.
I know, right? That makes you... It's sad for so many reasons. It's sad for the fact that it's gone, and it's sad for the fact that we're just old. Because
I know.
I mean, 15 years, that means there is quite possibly people listening to this. In fact, I know there are people listening to this who are young enough to have no idea what Residential Street is. But hopefully they've heard about it enough. I don't know. I feel like it's iconic. Disney-MGM Studios.
Yeah,
I feel like
I think it's
something
iconic
that people
enough.
still miss. Yeah, but that made me sad. And of course, since it did close in 2003, that means Residential Street only ever existed during the Disney-MGM Studios days. It never even saw Disney's Hollywood Studios.
Right.
So that's interesting as well, although totally makes sense. So, I have super fond memories of Residential Street. I love it. And so I wanted to play a little game with you today where we make a list of our top 7, considering that there were originally 7 houses on this street, our top 7 homes of what we think would be on Residential Street today if it were a new thing in 2019. Now, for me, I feel like if this were a new thing in 2019, a couple of things would be different. As I mentioned before, there were kind of some generic homes that they could use for shooting, but in this world of IP-driven stuff, I feel like every one of these houses today would be a recognizable house from a favorite Disney show of some sort. And I also think it would essentially just be a selfie Instagram museum these days. I feel like that's kind of what it would be used for. There's certainly no studio tour. So I feel like that's what would happen. I don't know. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I kind of agree, but at the same time, I was coming up with my list, and I was thinking, what are some things that they could actually still use and still do legitimate filming there to this day, like getting exterior shots, bringing the cast in for a day and getting them outside the house doing something. So I definitely feel like it could be, like you said, a place for people to get their selfies and their photo ops, but it could also still be something they could work with today in terms of filming.
Yeah, now I actually, not too long ago, well, it was a while ago actually, in 2014, Disney Parks blog put out a little article they called A Hollywood Classic Residential Street, and it was a little article about the street, and I actually left a comment and got an answer about something that has been driving me nuts for many, many years, and I want to read this simply because it's going to relate to our lists, I believe. So, I asked them on the Disney Parks blog, I said, hey, I've been trying to get the answer to this question for years. I remember seeing the home of the Golden Girls on Residential Street, but the TV series premiered in 1985. Disney-MGM Studios opened in 1989. So does that mean that this house facade was not the actual one used for the show? Is it just a replica? Was it ever used for shooting? And they replied, they said, hi, Jeff. My friends at the Walt Disney World Library and Research Center are helping me answer this question. The house was indeed used for the show's filming. The original exterior house shots were of a real house in California, which is what was used in the show in 1985. But after they built the one at the studios, which was finished at least a year before the park opened, they used it for additional exterior shots. So I was just relieved to get an answer from them because it really, I don't like the idea, like I'm cool with replicas and stuff if you say, hey, it's a replica. I can't stand it when they show you replicas of things and they essentially lie to an audience and say, this is where it was shot. That drives me crazy. So I was really happy to officially get an answer saying that, yes, sir, some seasons of the Golden Girls did shoot minor exterior shots at this house. So that's cool. I mention that because in my list there are definitely shows that obviously exist today, and these homes are of some real locations. So even if they were to build it at Disney's Hollywood Studios today in 2019, the hope would be that they'd do some sort of shooting there. So I have a list. It's in no particular order. I don't know. Is yours in a particular order?
No order.
Okay, let's get one of your houses. I'm very curious to see if we get any overlay here. And of course, as I mentioned, these are homes from Disney things, so it could be, Disney owns almost everything these days. One thing I will say is if it aired on ABC, I'm counting it as Disney, even though it might be like a Sony Pictures project or something. If it's on ABC, that's close enough for me. So, what's on your list?
So right now, my first thing I wrote down, one of the first things that came to my mind was Blackish and any of its spin-off shows. Because it's got, I think, now two spin-off shows, Grownish and Mixedish. I feel like that would be a perfect time, especially the new show, Mixedish, to be able to build a home that is in that time period, because I think it's a period piece that's in the 80s or 90s, so they could build a home specific to that time period and just film the exteriors here, and maybe every now and then, bring the cast to do an exterior scene out in the lawn or something like that. But I feel that's a popular enough kind of franchise for Disney and ABC now, they could do something with one of those shows.
Yeah, that was almost on my list. It did not make it, but I will also say with my list, these are not necessarily shows that I like. These are shows that I just feel like the Walt Disney Company would want to use in some way, shape, or form because they feel like it would, the audiences would enjoy it. So Blackish was almost on my list, but it didn't make it. An ABC show that did make it on my list is The Goldbergs.
Yes, that's my next one.
Okay. Yeah, The Goldbergs, I feel like, is a show that is really popular. I've definitely lost interest in it. I stopped it after the first season, but it's a really popular show. I just hope that, if they were to build this facade of the Goldbergs' home, that there would be something like super cool 80s in the front yard lawn, like some recognizable toys or big wheels or something that would be like, oh, give you that nostalgia punch.
Yes, yes. Like we've been binging the Goldbergs past couple months, and we've caught up with it now. And yeah, I think that house is now. I think they're on season 5 or 6 now. It's iconic enough.
Are you enjoying it?
I am. It's definitely it's out there a little bit, and it's especially in the time period because they don't give specific years that episodes take place. They should always say it's 1980 something. So, one episode could be about Batman the movie coming out, but that wasn't until 89, or in the next episode could be something that took place in 82. It's kind of open in terms of the setting, but I still really enjoy it.
A fun little trivia fact here. Who's the narrator voice on that show?
That would be Patton Oswalt.
Who is what Disney character?
He is Remy.
Exactly. There we go. Cool. So yeah, the Goldbergs, that was also on your list?
Yes, on my list as well.
Okay, give me another one on your list.
So this one, I haven't seen the show, but I know it's a popular enough show that actually takes place in Orlando, and it's called Fresh Off the Boat.
Oh, does that take place in Orlando? I didn't realize that.
From when I remember when the show first debuted, it's about that family who moves to Orlando in the 90s. So I think it still takes place in Orlando.
Oh, I didn't even realize it was set in the 90s. Interesting. I've clearly never seen this show. But yeah, okay, Fresh Off the Boat. And they have like an iconic family home, I assume.
I assume.
Yeah, all of these homes we're mentioning, of course, need to make sense on a suburban neighborhood street. So one on my list, very popular ABC show, I can't even believe it's still running, is Meredith Grey's home from Grey's Anatomy.
I've got that too, yes.
Do you really?
That's so do. Funny.
Yeah, I mean, there are just some really iconic, especially, I think when you think Disney TV, the first thing, obviously Disney Channel, then ABC. And, I mean, how long has Grey's Anatomy been on the air now?
15 years, I think. I think they're getting into their 15th season or something like that.
That's wild to me. That's just crazy. I know people who still watch and have seen every single episode, and I can't get into doctor shows. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But I've never got into any of them. Not ER, not Grey's Anatomy, none of them. They just don't interest me.
I've gotten into the more comedic ones like Scrubs. But yeah, I can't think of any doctor shows. I know Sydney has been watching The Good Doctor. I think that's also on ABC.
Oh yeah.
With she's loving that. But yeah, I just haven't really been to the hospital dramas.
Yeah, I think Grey's Anatomy would be a good fit for Residential Street because it would hit that demographic, I think, of like, middle-aged moms type of thing. I think that's the audience that watches that show. I'm sorry if I offended anybody, but I think that's the audience. So I feel like that would be a good fit for Residential Street. Mm-hmm. Let's hear another one on your list.
So I was debating on putting this because I think they're coming up, like they announced the next season is going to be the last season, but I put Modern Family.
That is on my list as well, yes.
Yeah, you could. I think they have 2 or 3 different houses for the different characters that you could put up on there.
Yeah, which one would you choose? Is there a specific house you would pick?
I'd probably choose the Dunphys house.
That is what I put. That's so funny. Yeah. I think that's a pretty iconic house in the show. I mean, any of them really. Mitch and Cam's would work. So, but yeah, I think Modern Family is a huge hit for ABC. It's, I think, going into its 10th season. Let's think. It was the first D23 Expo was 2009, and that's the year it premiered. Yeah, so 10.
Yeah, and I think they said this will be the last season too.
Yeah, I think they said that last season. I was really hoping It's funny because The Middle and Modern Family came out the same time because I remember them both at the first D23 Expo, and they were like showing screenings of them, and so they both came out that fall, and I watched them both, but like several years ago. In fact, this past season of Modern Family, the entire season is sitting on my DVR because I haven't even watched it yet. I'm a completionist, so I will watch it, but I'm ready for it to end. And I'm like, I wish The Middle had gone the couple of extra seasons in Modern Family. But The Middle, don't get me wrong, it had a really great run, but between the two, if one of them had to stay, I wish the middle had stayed, but whatever. I wanted to put the middle on this list, but I didn't. I did want to make one on the list, though, for the kids who would be there and hopefully something they would enjoy. Speaking of shows that are soon getting canceled, Andy Mack's House from the Disney Channel show Andy Mack. Really popular show. Admittedly not super familiar with it, but the home is in a very suburban neighborhood, and I just feel like, kids would get excited the way that we loved to see the Adventures in Wonderland house.
Yeah.
I think kids would like to see Andy Mack's house, and there seems to be a lot of controversy about the cancellation of that show.
Yeah, kind of on the same page. My next one is also like a Disney Channel show. It's one of the newer ones called Sydney to the Max.
I've heard of it. I know nothing about it.
I kind of put both that one and another one called Fast Lane. They're both very new shows that just debuted in the past year on Disney Channel. I definitely felt like, kids these days should have a familiar, like you said, a familiar house that they'd love to see. And Disney Channel has several shows that take place in suburban communities, so they can always build a exterior of a house, shoot a couple of shots, and start into the episode, and everything else can, like Golden Girls, can be filmed out in California. And plus they could always build a generic looking house and they can just set dress it so that maybe different shows could use it and film it at a different angle.
Yeah, paint different color, which is essentially what they do. So cool. So yeah, Disney Channel representation on there for sure. The kids need something to enjoy. And this next one for me, it's old but new. And because of that, this is gonna, I think, appeal to generations of people. And that is the home of the Connors from Roseanne.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so they have a pretty iconic house, I would say. Obviously, the series, I think, started in the 80s, right? The original?
Yeah.
Or was it the early 90s?
I think it's late 80s.
Yeah, and obviously, that show was super famous. Roseanne, The Connors is on television now. I feel like this is a home that people would totally want to take a selfie in front of. What's next on your list?
Well, the last one I have here on my list, and it kind of goes with the what we were talking about with the Disney Channel shows. I was thinking about, the DComs, the original movies. Yeah. They should, build some stuff they could use for that. And I specifically put Zombies because Zombies was very popular. I know they're already making another one, and they're about high school kids. And of course, high school kids are going to have houses they're going to need to live at. So I figure, that would be a good one to represent.
Can I tell you, I actually really like Zombies. Did you see it?
I didn't see it, unfortunately, but I did hear good things.
I shouldn't say I really liked it. I enjoyed Zombies. Like, I tend to tune into the DComs out of curiosity or research for the show or something like that. And listen, I'm not the right age to be watching DComs, so it should probably come as no surprise that I often don't enjoy them very much. But I remember watching Zombies and being like, this is fun. As far as DComs are concerned, I would probably say the High School Musical ones are my favorites. And that kind of felt like the closest thing to those. So for that reason, I kind of liked it. But yeah, Zombies is fun. And like you said, they are shooting another one right now. I would not be surprised if there's more beyond this. So we'll see what happens with that. So one on my list, this is a very generic one. In fact, I don't have a specific home. But I feel like Disney would want to represent this network, which they partially own. And I feel like there are a lot of middle-aged moms who would love to see their favorite home from one of the highest rated Lifetime Christmas movies.
Oh, see, I'm learning things. I didn't know that Disney partially owned Lifetime.
Yeah, they own 50% of Lifetime. I think it's like the same split for, is it A&E or National Geographic or one of those? Mm-hmm. But yeah, Disney partially owns Lifetime. And I mean, first of all, it would be kind of cool to have a home on Residential Street that was always in winter. Like, that would be fun. And you could show, if they were still going with the studio theme, they could show and this is how we create, winter in the middle of Florida. And
right.
But I just feel like I don't know those Christmas movies well enough to even name one on Lifetime, but I know people love them. And I feel like Disney would totally use it to promote their Lifetime Christmas movies.
I definitely could see that. And I definitely agree with the fact that, have it dressed up for winter and show the behind the scenes of like how in the middle of humid summer Florida, you can create a scene that looks like middle of December winter. I think that's a great idea.
So there's that. You said you're done with your list, right?
Yeah, that's all 7 of mine.
Okay, because we had a bunch of matches. So another network I feel like Disney would want to represent is Freeform. Of course, that's hitting a tween audience there. And there are 2 homes that came to my mind when I thought of Freeform. They're both canceled. One of them has a spinoff now, but I do feel like they're fairly recent and iconic that they may throw the home from the Fosters on there. Or perhaps Pretty Little Liars.
Pretty Little Liars, yes. I have a lot of friends that are really into that show. That definitely would capture a lot of the teen and tween audience.
Yeah, and that is the one that seems to be living on. The Fosters. I don't think The Fosters has any spinoffs. I could be wrong, but Pretty Little Liars I know does. So, I think that's going to be a popular show for a long time. And I wouldn't be surprised to see it on Residential Street if it existed in 2019. And so that was my 7, but I do have a bonus one that kind of started as a joke. And the more I think about it, Disney would probably do it, which breaks my heart.
Oh, don't!
But,
I have a feeling I see where this might be going.
Well, what are you thinking?
You're thinking Simpsons, aren't you?
Yeah, I think they would build the home of the Simpsons.
Yeah, in this day and age, especially if they're doing things of like photo ops, I could definitely see Disney doing like come see the real life Simpsons house.
Yeah, like I said, when it popped in my head and I was like, oh, that's funny. I was like, oh, that would happen. that really would happen.
It would.
So, I guess, I don't know, that would be part of maybe we don't want Residential Street to come back. At the beginning of this episode idea, I was like, no, I want Residential Street back. And now I'm like, maybe I don't.
Disney would totally use it as a like upcharge Instagram walkthrough.
Yeah, well, I mean, gosh, this whole Mickey Mouse thing at Downtown Disney. What are they calling it? The pop?
No, the pop-up store. I forget what they're calling it. The
pop-up Mickey Instagram museum. That I have such strong feelings about Instagram museums. I think that they're great marketing tools. I don't think that you should ever be charged to go into an Instagram museum because you're essentially paying to advertise for people. So that drives me nuts. But at the same time, I would absolutely produce an Instagram museum because it sounds like people are willing to spend $30 or $40 to go take pictures for Instagram, which is crazy. But
I mean, it's all about that selfie.
Yeah, I also think that a Residential Street, I'm a little sad that it was never used as like a Halloween party opportunity because I think it would be so much fun to go trick-or-treating on a studio backlot.
That would have been so cool. I mean, it's great that they did use it for Christmas. And especially seeing the Osborne lights decorating the houses from the photos I've seen. But yeah, I feel like in this day of age, there could be so many uses that Disney could do with a Residential Street.
Yeah, so as we said, it is kind of funny to think that like what was once the Golden Girls' home is now the planet of Batuu. But it's also equally sad to me that, like, from what I've been told, I remember asking, I was taking one of those behind-the-scenes tours at Walt Disney World, and I remember asking the tour guide about Residential Street and, like, really what happened to it and stuff, and he's like, oh, I literally watched them bulldoze it. So I'm like, oh gosh. Like, it wasn't... At least the Golden Girls' home, which I'm not particularly a fan of, but I recognize its historic place in the history of television. I'm like, that couldn't have at least been saved, but no, just bulldozed and
yeah,
and bulldozed for the car stunt show. You know? Oh man,
I don't want to think about that anymore. Yeah. I will say, funny anecdote. Working there, I can remember a couple of times when I was getting ready for a Spectacle of Dancing Lights shift. Me and my friends, the backlot tour would close early in the day. and we would just go and we would just roam the boneyard. They had no qualms about us kind of just roaming the boneyard. We would get photos with the Flight of the Navigator spaceship and like get to sit in these little prop vehicles, and so that was always kind of a fun thing to get to do on during downtime that they didn't care.
Did you ever get a picture with Wayne Zielinski's solar van from Honey, I Blew Up the Kid?
It was never there when I started working at Hollywood Studios. At least from what I could tell. I can't even remember the last time that solar van was on the backlot tour. I don't remember ever seeing it.
Well, I obviously do because I'm obsessed. But yeah, I remember they actually had like several of them in a row. They were obviously made several of those vans for the film.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, like the boneyard that you mentioned, they just let stuff sit there and rot and decay, which is really bizarre to me because I'm like,
it is.
You guys have an entire archives department. I understand it's like difficult to find storage for all of these things, but at a certain point, I'm like, at least put a cover over it of some sort. Like, these are iconic props in movie vehicles. So, it's always sad. In fact, that happened with the Back to the Future DeLorean. One of, like, the main DeLoreans from Back to the Future. Obviously a Universal film, but that was sitting in the back lot rotting. And to the point that, like, people were actually stealing pieces off of it. And there's a really great documentary out there. The name of it, I'm forgetting. It might be Back in Time, but that might be another Back to the Future documentary. But in any case, a team of people, put it back together. They fixed it up. They actually asked people if you stole a piece, would really appreciate it if you'd send it back to us. We won't ask any questions. And they put it back together in a really, really, really nice state. And for a while, it was on display at Universal Studios Hollywood. Now it's in the car museum here in Los Angeles. Is it the Peterson Car Museum? I might have made that up, but it's there now. So it's like nice to see that it's being taken care of. And no, I am not comparing the Honey, I Blew Up the Kid's solar van to the DeLorean from Back to the Future. I'm just saying in general, I wish that, if the DeLorean can be left in a state of falling apart, almost anything can. It's one of the most iconic movie cars of all time. So
speaking of the solar van, I remember seeing it on the route as a kid, and they were saying, "Oh, Honey, we Blew Up the Kid" was filmed here at Disney-MGM Studios. And so I remember going back and watching the movie, and at that time, I didn't realize that different scenes could be shot in different places. So I'm like watching a movie, like I'm thinking the whole movie is shot at MGM Studios. I'm watching like, this doesn't look like a neighborhood I saw at the MGM Studios. Like, what are they talking about? This was shot here.
Yeah.
Didn't realize, it's just one scene.
It's movie magic.
Yes.
Speaking of that, we were talking about the Simpsons house. I am very curious. What are your thoughts on the Simpsons appearing at the D23 Expo?
It's jarring. It really is.
Now, why is this more jarring, though, than, like, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I completely agree with you that it's weird and jarring. But why is it so much more jarring than, like, Star Wars or Marvel being there? Because it is.
It's I was thinking about that, and I definitely agree. Like, even when they bought Marvel and they bought Star Wars, and all of a sudden now we're seeing this as Disney property, that was jarring back then. But I think maybe because, I don't know, maybe it's just because with The Simpsons being owned by Fox for so long, and The Simpsons has such a, sense of humor that is way beyond sometimes kids' humor. It's so weird just to see that is now part of the Disney brand. Like, Simpsons can be a family show, but there's been some times where it's not a family show. So it's just, I don't know. I think it's gonna take getting used to. I think give it a year and I'll be like, oh yeah, Simpsons, Disney, yeah, that's nothing. Just like we're all used to Marvel.
Yeah, I personally hope I never get used to it because I don't want the Simpsons to feel normal at Disney. And on top of that, although this is, to me, it's very weird that Universal has a Simpsons attraction. I know that there's the whole Marvel superhero island at Islands of Adventure, which still is weird to me. The only reason I'm not like bulldoze that is because the Spider-Man attraction there is so incredible. I would be sad to see that go. But I don't know. The Simpsons at the Expo, that happened fast. That happened real fast. We're like, yep, they're part of the family. Here we go. So
it's like that they were getting it ready to go when they first started talking about buying, like merging together. And they were like, all right, we'll be ready to go once it's done.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, because I think they said they're actually going to like have characters.
I know. That's
too.
what they mention, like the appearance of characters, which I'm like, are you telling me the Universal Studios character costumes are coming to the Disney Expo? And if not, what are the Disney ones going to look like? Like,
Yeah.
I just thought of something totally random. There was a year, oh my gosh, I hope I'm not making this up. I'm pretty sure this is true. There was a year that Bart Simpson hosted the Grammys, I think. Or maybe it was the Emmys would be more appropriate, but I feel like it was the Grammys. And it was like a person in costume, but it was not like the Universal costume. It was more like a Halloween mask you'd buy at a Spirit of Halloween store. It was very weird. Gosh, I hope I didn't make that up, but I can see that.
I mean, considering, like, God, back in the 90s, like, Bart Simpson was a big advertising icon.
Yeah.
So I could see, like, if that was something that happened, it probably could have happened in the 90s or early 2000s.
Yeah, no, it was definitely the 90s. It would have been probably even like the early 90s, I think. It was crazy. But yeah, wow, random thought. Anywho, anything else you'd like to add about Residential Street or just Disney-MGM Studios in general and how much we love and miss it?
I mean, Disney-MGM Studios, Disney's Hollywood Studios, whatever they want to call it these days, like, it will always be my favorite Disney park. No matter what's going on with it, no matter what transition is happening, like, I just have so many fond memories of visiting that park as a kid, working that park, and just visiting it now with my two kids. Like, I love it. Like, it may not have like the biggest selection of rides, but for me, it's got what it needs, and I will always love it to the end of time.
Yeah, I feel the same way about Disney's Hollywood Studios. It's my favorite park at Walt Disney World for sure. And even during the construction period, when everybody was hating on it, I'm happy to see we're getting toward the end of that construction period. Now people can start hating on Epcot, I guess, because not that people should. Epcot's a phenomenal park, even when it's under construction. But like, it just seems like people really are like, oh, this is terrible, when, you know, it's going through changes. It's going through growing pains. And obviously, the addition of Galaxy's Edge is a pretty major thing for Disney's Hollywood Studios. I will always, as much as that park changes, I hope Hollywood Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard, and Echo Lake always remain recognizable. Even if stuff in the area changes, I hope they remain recognizable, because to me, I don't know, visually, that plus the Eiffel Tower, may it rest in peace, is like the visual things that I remember. Even Residential Street to a point, but like I said, it's been 15 years. I'm, starting to accept the fact that that's not there anymore. But I don't know. Echo Lake, especially for some reason, to me, screams Disney-MGM Studios, and I love the fact that it still does.
I would say Hollywood Studios, it may have lost its studios theme, the behind the scenes element, but as long as it has Hollywood a part of it, and that front area stays the same, it'll still be that Hollywood Studios that I know and love.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that means it's trivia time. All right, Banks, do you want to hit me with a trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
I will hit you up first with a question. So we were actually you just mentioned it not too long ago. The Eiffel Tower used to loom over the backlot there at Disney-MGM Studios from opening until a few years ago. So there was always a fun piece of trivia that I loved hearing about this hat, about the Eiffel Tower, and that is the hat they could put on that during Christmas. They used to have a Santa hat they would put on it. What was the hat size of the Eiffel Tower?
Oh, gosh. I am so terrible at this sort of thing. So you're asking, like, in feet? How many feet?
I don't know if it's in feet, but there's like a specific size, like how you would size a hat that someone wears. There's a hat size, and
well, I'm gonna guess because I don't know how hats are sized, but 52.
They call it the hat size is 342 3/4.
Wow. Okay. I wonder if that's 342 3/4. Yeah, I don't know how hats are measured. Yeah, those statistics are always ridiculous whenever they come up with I always love like watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and the statistics they give of like how much helium's in a balloon or how big it is, or I'm like, these are the dumbest facts ever, but people must enjoy them because they're constantly thrown at us. So
I know. Yeah. I just always remember them mentioning that little factoid every time I would go on the backlot tour. I think it was even part of the automated spiel.
For me, I'm going to ask you, it's about the Osborne family spectacle of dancing lights, and I'm wondering, when did that come to Disney-MGM Studios?
That would be 1995.
Boom.
Is when it came.
Right. You are indeed correct. 1995 is when that came to Disney-MGM Studios. As we mentioned, it was part of Residential Street. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when it first came, the word dancing was not part of it. It was the Osborne family spectacle of lights. And then it was years later, I think once it got to the New York Street area, I don't think it ever did it on Residential Street, but when the lights started moving in beat with the music, that's when they added the dancing in there.
2006, I believe, it was the first year that it was a dancing lights.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Well, fun times. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Banks, to talk about Disney-MGM Studios and Residential Street. Why don't you let the folks know where they can find you?
You can find me on Attractions Magazine. I work for them over at Twitter at Attractions, Facebook.com/Attractions Magazine, and Instagram as well, Attractions Magazine. Personally, you can find me on Twitter at Banks Lee, over on Facebook, and on Instagram at Disney Goofball.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Always a pleasure.
And before we get going, I want to give a shout out to Princess Nikki Mouse, who left a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Thank you so much, Princess Nikki Mouse, for the review saying, "I love this podcast. It keeps me informed and updated on Disney news, and I especially appreciate that it includes all Disney parks around the world. I also really enjoy hearing from the various special guests. The conversations are very relatable as a Disney fan, and it just makes me want to join in. It's safe to say that this is my favorite podcast." Thanks so much, Nikki Mouse. I really, really appreciate that review. It helps other Disney fans find the show more easily. So if you have not left a 5-star rating and review yet for Disney Coast to Coast on Apple Podcasts, make sure you head over there and do that. I also want to give a shout out to my patrons, Philip, Rio, Monet, Anna, Diego, James, Gerardo, Jared, and Matt. Thank you so much for being supporters of Disney Coast to Coast. If you would like behind-the-scenes access, Q&A live streams, early episode releases, and even possibly being a guest on Trivia Time, and so much more, it all starts for just $1 over at patreon.com/DisneyCTC. That's patreon.com/DIZNEYCTC. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.